Thank you.
Okay, so good to see you again. And in the audience, welcome again very much to Conversations, a dear friend of mine and the world, I would say, that being Ardeshir Ommani. And we remind you, he is the co-founder, along with his lovely wife Eleanor, of the American-Iranian Friendship Committee, a major organization in terms of bringing understanding to, well, not only Iran-American relations, but the broader world. And we did a program with him just a few weeks ago in the midst of the events then, and now we're going to bring it up to date. Ardeshir, so good to see you. Welcome, my dear good friend.
Mr. Harold Channer, thank you very much for inviting me.
My great good pleasure. We had talked before as it was in the midst of the events going on in Egypt a few weeks ago. Now it's included Libya and other things and everything. So the reporting and the questions of it, you sent me a lot of very interesting postings and so forth. And we want to read particularly Libya. It's a major country in terms of the broader geopolitical and political organization of world society. And it's had a reporting going on a great deal of which seems to have been very one-sided, as it were, maybe. But how do you see things now?
At this point, the United States is in a phase of damage control, meaning they want to cover up their losses.
Oh, is the United States taken collectively, you say, the political and media and so forth?
What I understood from President Obama's press conference this afternoon, very short press conference, 5 minutes of speech, what I understood that he is trying to project the United States in the view of the world that the U.S. is still in control and is guiding the events, and the damages to foreign policy of the United States is minor, and the United States once again is coming back by saying for things like that we are picking up the people who are leaving Libya and going to Tunisia. We are picking them up from Tunisia, and he said that he has sent helicopters to the borders of Libya to pick up foreign nationals. But the third point that he said bothered me a little, and that is that we are observing, militarily observing, how we can help the resistance forces, which implies military intervention to me. But overall, I think the United States is in a phase of damage control. Too much damage has come in a short period of time, in a month and a half. One of them, just last night, the president of Yemen accepted that he would soon resign.
Really? I didn't see that.
That's correct.
Okay.
And the second thing, more significant, that the Prime Minister of Egypt resigned this morning.
Yeah, I saw that they were going to have. Yeah, go on. Yeah, go on.
The two together, and also when
Yemen is under threat now. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, Venezuelan President Chavez, he announced that he is creating a commission composed of leaders of Latin America and Muslim leaders and the Arab leaders and the European to go between and talk to Gaddafi, and President Gaddafi also
to get at the facts,
to resolve really the conflicts and the problems. In other words, taking the initiative out of the hands of the United States and also removing it from the games that the United States plays in the United Nations. In other words, Venezuelan President Chavez is putting the United States on a defensive. And it
With
is.
that statement, that was an official statement of the country, yeah, and Hugo Chavez. Yeah.
Yes. So there's a community of leaders outside of the United Nations and outside of the domain of the United States and NATO and Pentagon. It's getting gradually formed that deals with the problems not the way that the United States usually channels it and gathers all the rabbits around it.
Or running dogs?
Running dogs, that's a bit poor rabbit.
Yeah, that's right. We're on the side of the rabbits, right, yeah. Right. Anyway.
So, this is what I see it's happening. And what is interesting also, that so-called the rebels, first of all, there are 20 factions. This is not a national liberation front the way it was in Vietnam, unified.
You're talking about Libya now, particularly?
Yes,
yeah, okay.
Libya.
On
yes,
Libya, yeah.
on Libya, the so-called the National Liberation Front, the Committee for Freedom of all different names. There are 20 of them that they all claim that they want to free Libya, but they cannot unite on certain principles together so that the world community knows whom to talk to.
I know. I'm very familiar, as you know, with Libya. Had done programs with Muammar Gaddafi and have been there many times. But I also am cognizant of the fact that there is this thing that started with Tunisia, going to Egypt, and now Libya, and then there's maybe there's other Yemen, there's Bahrain, there's things, other places, Jordan. There's a wider thing going on, and that might be characteristic of many. The Independent newspaper has a headline today: Egypt has revolution, now what? So that there's a revolution, there's going to be ramifications from these people asking for freedom, which is a very abstract idea.
That's right.
But do they have an organizational structure that can fill the void of what had been filled by, in many cases, Mubarak and so forth, ruthless dictatorships that were that have to be replaced by some sort of a organizational structure? And that's characteristic perhaps of Libya as well, even though I think Libya had set themselves up ideologically or in terms of ideas in a way that was could be seen to be very earth-shaking, progressive, in my view, and I'd be happy to talk to all of that. I was shocked by what's going on, that there was so much dissension, but it's coming from Benghazi.
Yes.
And there's always been animosity between the East and the West. The Benghazi Senussi tribe, things
You're
are
familiar
tribal.
with it.
Not really, not scholarly, but I'm very familiar. I've been there a number of times and giving it a great deal of thought. I'm happy to talk about it, but it's
there
a
are
start.
There are families, extensive families and tribals, probably 12 of them in Benghazi and surrounding of Benghazi.
Well, if I may, there's really three. Tripletania it was called.
There's
three major ones that sort of group. There's Sunni, and then there's another in the south, and then there's Gaddafi, and there's three main ones, but there are other tribal units and extended families and
I was talking
clans.
within Sunni.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
There are 12
in Benghazi
different
in the east.
groupings that it really makes it very hard to deal with. I think they're still in, if I may say, they're in a pre-capitalist mode of production, and they do not want to submit to a national unity, a nation with a national army, with a national constitution. They're still it's a pre-capitalist relations that they have.
Well, I wonder if I could talk. You want to talk a little bit about Libya? I know a little bit because I've been there a lot and read a lot. And Libya was, Herodotus said, the ancient writer Greek said, the new comes from Libya, and all of North Africa was called Libya in the Greek period and so forth. But Libya was coming into the more modern experience. It had been under the Ottoman until about 1911, 1912, and then it was occupied by the Italians in a colonial pattern, much like the French and the British and the Belgians and so forth, and everything. And they had been colonized and suffered a terrible Holocaust. They had a resistance to the occupation by the Italians. A famous Libyan, his name was Omar Mukhtar, organized a resistance to that. And it varies between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population of Libya was ruthlessly in concentration camps. I mean, very ruthlessly decimated.
By the Italians.
Similar to what happened in Nazi Germany to Jewish people by the Italian, and particularly under the Italian fascist Mussolini. Okay? So they had suffered mightily.
Yes.
They also were some of the poorest people in the world. They had rich traditions and so forth, go back into antiquity, but they were very poor in terms of measurements of that. Coming out, they had a King Idris, who had become the king. They were the first country to be designated in 1951 by the United Nations as an independent country that's something, and it was ruled by King Idris, and it was Mr. Muammar Gaddafi in 1969, September 1, made a revolution with 27 junior officers and made a taking over of the government, and with a totally bloodless coup, and and he was welcomed by virtually all of the people in Libya when he made that. There was no opposition to it, really. And then he set about setting up a country in a very unique way. There were very few university graduates, but there was a great deal of this culture. There were only 4 million people about that time, and they then discovered they had great reservoirs of oil.
Yes.
Very rich oil, sulfur-free.
Since you're referring to the economy of the country and also social developments, I would like to give you some statistical information,
okay.
Especially under the condition that media of the United States has been falsifying the facts.
Relating again to Libya now.
Yes,
yes,
right.
okay.
I'm talking about Libya.
Yeah, all right, yeah, yeah.
And
he was.
There has been good development, economic developments, and human social developments in the last since 1969. And I would like to give you some figures.
You want the figures? I could go for another couple minutes in laying out. He set up, if I may, a system in Arabic. Let me just do this for a couple minutes, and then you go to the statistic if you would. He set up a system that he calls Jamahiriya. In Arabic, as I understand, Jamhura, I think something like that means republic.
That's correct.
Which reflects what we think of in the West, guided by the Enlightenment, the Scottish Enlightenment, United States of America, the steam engine, the Industrial Revolution, the post-feudal system in Europe and so forth, Adam Smith, the beginning of economics and so forth. That model we think of as a representative democracy that we have, as being the form of what we mean by democracy. And he set about, after having taken over, to set up what he would challenge. And the United States of America challenged the feudal order in a fundamental way for the idea of the historical legitimacy of what's developing out of the zeitgeist of the time. He set up a pattern that was challenging the way in which the world was being run largely by people who were allied with the United States, and the pattern of the United States that saw political and economic and social organization in a certain pattern that was historically legitimate. Everything else outside of that was illegitimate. He set it up to challenge that. Yeah. And he set it up into what he called a Jamahiriya. I want to get to the statistics. Two things. One was, everywhere in that country, he set up people's meeting halls where everybody over 18 years of age could go and participate in decision-making and discussion and debate. Everybody, it was like town hall meetings, and everybody over 18 could participate toward a participatory democracy, not a representative democracy with their elections where they can be cynically seen to be bought off and so forth by powerful interests in that. And then he also set up in the economic sphere a system where a public sector, they had a great deal of money come, they distributed it to a number of people in terms of housing, health, and that sort of thing from the public sector, social. Like Norway, they had a great deal of a small population. They got electricity into every village, but they set it up. You could start a business, and they wouldn't allow anybody who starts a business to hire anybody. They insisted that the people who make up the business be the owners of the business, which is something that is a signal for beyond where we are, as we face a jobless recovery on the international order. He was setting himself up as a model, like the United States of America to feudal Europe, to the established system, which is assuming legitimacy in the country of Libya, and it got pulled off in large dimension, but there are some statistics that could back up the results of that. But apparently there's been a great deal of people who do not feel that that was adequately implemented as a standard that he thought could be of relevance to the whole world in terms of the need for a major change. Okay, that's all background.
Yeah. The reason that the United States is out to destroy the government of Libya, and with the intention of capturing the oil fields, and using it, obviously, and selling it in the market, is not because President Gaddafi or Mu-Ammar Gaddafi has established a different sort of a parliament, shura, as in Islam and Arabic societies say it, not because of the form of one form or another form of government, but their objection is that it's a corrupt government. It is a dictatorial.
Well, that's
government.
what they're telling us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And these are the reasons presented not only by the U.S. administration and the mainstream media of the United States, but also by some people who consider themselves to be progressive, politics, and even socialists. I've seen in the last 2 weeks that they would like to see that somehow the United States could overthrow the government of Gaddafi. I'm of the opinion that many of the facts, so-called facts, to begin with, are fabricated.
Okay.
They are not presenting the realities of Libya. I'll give you some figures that belongs to the CIA site with regard to developments in the last few decades.
Okay.
For example, infant mortality rate in the world scale, in the world dimension, is 55 out of 1,000. In the Arab countries, other Arab countries and the Muslim, is 52.
Okay.
And in Libya is 25. It's the smallest fatality.
Infant mortality. That's a very positive signal. Yeah.
That's correct.
They got health care to people. Yeah.
It is half of under 5 mortality rate. In the world scale is 83. In the Arab countries and other Muslim countries is 64. In Libya is 20.
Okay.
Again, very small. Life expectancy, that's interesting.
Yeah.
In the last 30 years, the life expectancy in Libya has increased by 20 years.
Wow.
It is significant. Life expectancy at birth in the world scale is 68 years and 1/10 of a year. In the Arab countries, other Arab countries, is 69 years. And in Libya is 73 years for female. And for men, in the world scale is 63. In the Arab countries is 66, and in Libya is 69 years of age they die. Birth attended by trained personnel, like nurses.
Yes, right. What midwives?
Midwives, or they're trained. In the world scale, only 57% of women get the service of trained personnel. In Arab countries, 67% receive that. And what do you think in Libya is?
I don't know.
94%.
Right, okay.
Of the
Sounds
Libyan
almost as good as Cuba.
Maybe even better than Iran.
Maybe than Cuba.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And adults and children infected with HIV. Okay. In the world scale, we have 40 million people are inflicted with HIV.
40 million.
In the Arab countries, 500,000. In Libya, only 7,000. The ratio to the population is much, much smaller.
Well, they have a small population, but that's the ratio. Is the ratio?
The ratio also is
smaller.
they
have a smaller population.
Yeah, percent of adult ages between 15 and 49 with HIV in the world scale is 1.2% of the population. What do you think in Libya is?
I can't guess. You
two-tenths of the population.
Those are staggering figures.
That's correct. And
remember, they were the poorest people in the world.
Exactly.
Ardeshir in 1969, they were right there with Haiti.
I can tell you about the numbers in a minute. Okay. Water situation and the land fertility, fertile land situation. Safe water. Safe water and sanitation. In the world scale, 85% of the urban population receive safe water. In the rural areas, in the world scale, only 40% receive safe water. In the other Arab countries, in the urban areas, 91% receives safe water.
But in the rural?
But in Libya, 97% of the people receive safe water in the urban area. And also in the rural area is much higher than the world scale, which is 40%. And in the Arab countries is 70%. And in Libya is 96%.
That's a major positive figure there.
This is fantastic.
And realize again, underscore. Do you realize, Ardeshir, that I think when they made the revolution, there were only I think 4 or 5 PhDs in the whole society, and they were the poorest people, and they've made a great deal. Now realize. I
would like to talk about literacy.
Okay. Okay.
Not much.
Okay. Go on. Lay it out. Time. That's interesting. You're laying out these facts.
Adult literacy rate of 2002, meaning 9 years ago, even female. On the world scale, 75% of the adult population can read and write.
Okay.
In the Arab countries, this number is 61%.
Okay.
And in Libya is 71%.
Okay.
Better than all the Arab countries in the Middle East and the Muslim countries.
Okay. Yeah.
Male, this figure in the case of male is higher. In the world scale, men can read. 86% of the people can read and write. In the Arab countries, 80% can do that. But in Libya, we say it in Persian, we said Libya.
Yeah.
Libya, it's 92%.
Okay, right. Yeah, they had education everywhere. There's schools everywhere. Everybody owned their own home,
Youth
own
literacy.
automobile, yeah.
Among the younger men and women, again, the record of Libya is much better than the world scale, and it's much better than all the other Muslim and Arab countries and African countries.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's very interesting. I like a person who's got some facts rather than just like me, just talking of ideas. You've got the facts, Mr. Friday, and I'm proud of that.
Thank you.
You know, just the facts, man.
Because
but you do realize
I was challenged.
Yeah.
I was challenged because I was listening to CNN Anderson. I was listening to
That's him.
all
Chris
these
Anderson
people.
is just off on a spiel. I mean, it's like Beck or something in terms of how evil that is.
In my eyes, it seems like they have put some CIA agents who are not intelligent. They do not have the education really. They are very callous, and they continuously talk against other nations.
Well, not only that, but Libya, you realize, just think back, you realize that Gaddafi was, when he came into power, young man, he got the support, and then in the opening years when he set up this JAMA, and I don't think, with all due respect, I heard you say you don't think it has anything to do with the way he organized. You would have to be pretty sophisticated to get beyond anything about how we can steal oil or get some advantage in terms of realpolitik and everything to get it. But it may have been somebody had the wit to see that the example he was setting was a threat to the grounding principles that claim historical legitimacy by the United States of America-led system that is not adequate to what the future requires. That would be a much bigger challenge, but most people would overlook it in face of normally reading things, you see. So it may be. But at that, you got to realize
it was a direct democracy.
That direct, participatory democracy is obviously a progressive thing. You want to have people have power. They don't now. The government is bought and paid for.
I do not
know. The assets are all owned by a tiny plutocrat.
Who is the senator and who is the congressman and who is representing me? I have been talking to some people. Can I meet with my senator?
No chance.
How do I do that?
How many $100,000 do you have to arrange a meeting at a coffee shop?
That's exactly somebody told me. You said, Mr.
Well, that
Ommani,
may be overdrawing it. Yeah, but still,
They said, Mr. Ommani, if you really want to, you want him to talk to you, first you have to come up with some money, and the money is not.
They've said that to you.
That's correct.
That has been said to you, and wanting to get in touch with people.
That's right.
They said, well, that's interesting.
If you want to talk to senators in Washington, first you have to send him a letter that how much you have contributed to his election.
Well, that may be one of the flax around him. There's a lot of flax around it. It's like courtiers in a royal setting. You know, they're trying to kiss the hem of the king, or you understand that. Oh, you understand. But also, and while I would be in defense, certainly it's in defense of the ideas. There. Now, whether in Libya, I was really committed, still am, to the ideas, and I got a lot of reasons to be so because I'm a progressive-minded person.
You are.
And I think, and he had the leadership. Just consider, he was young and he made that. He had the full. First of all, Abdel Nasser passed on the mantle to him in terms of that. Now, a lot of people think Nasser was a horrible pan-Arabist and everything. He was a pan-Arabist. So was Saddam Hussein, for that matter. You don't want to let the Arabs get organized against. And the major premise, the major dynamic of conflict in there is still Israel. It's still around the Israel thing and everything. Now, that's still not settled at all. But
what bothers the United States today with regard to Iran is that the people of Iran rose up and overthrew the Shah.
That's
and
right.
Also, in the case of Libya, the United States is mad of Gaddafi that he overthrew the king.
Yes, but the king, in that case, I don't think the king was as backed,
as vicious,
or as efficient, or as the Shah. The Shah with the Savak, and getting the great deal of money from the banks of the West and everything. So that was a little bit more direct, and that's relevant there and everything, 79. But he was definitely a thorn in the side of the imperialists, or the side of the American-led system of how things are going to be organized, claiming always that we're historically legitimate. And so he had that. Anyway, but the thing with the statistics, there were only 4 million people. It's a relatively small country. But then
no,
they
it's
discovered
6.7.
Well, now,
It's
but
6.7.
no, at the revolution,
Yeah.
it was poor. So it was very small. It wasn't like Egypt or something in popular. And they got these very rich resources of oil. So there was a great deal of money.
You know, in 1950, the population was 1.2 million
Where?
in Libya.
In 1950?
That's correct.
Okay, it wouldn't have been, yeah, it probably would have been under 4 million. Then by the time 67, 69 came, that's the time of Woodstock and everything. But so they had a lot of money, and it's been passed around socially like Norway, or like they call it a socialist system.
Yes.
But they do also have another challenge.
What's the plan of the United States with regard to Libya?
I'm not sure. You got to realize that he had the full support, not at Nasser, Mandela, freedom-fighting things that were going on all over the world. Practically every American Indian nation loved the man.
Yes.
Anybody who's been oppressed, anybody who's been underclassed, a whole huge population of the black population of the world love him because he was identified as an anti-imperialist kind of force in the world, even though he wasn't a Marxist. He wasn't under the Soviet Union or China. He was developing something new, like the Harada Sid, the new comes from Libya.
It's a combination of Arab socialism and Islam.
Well, it comports with Islam. It was women's liberationist. Have you been there? Yeah, I've been. It's the only country I was interested in, Ardeshir.
Yes.
Been there 6 or 7, 8 times or something. Did the program with Muammar Gaddafi. Did it with his envoy, or his friend and envoy, Ali Traki, who many people will know. Ramsey Clark and Sarah Flounders and all of these kind of people will recognize Ali Traki, who was, he should get the Nobel Peace Prize hands down, in my humble opinion, Ali. Anyway, but there was a wide support among the freedom movements for Muammar Gaddafi, and there was support among a number of people who think, intellectuals, for the ideas that he was proposing for organizing a society like from a tabula rasa.
Why do you think the United States so much hates the leader of Libya?
Well, he was
and
an
would like to overthrow?
Well, he was an anti-imperialist force in the world. They don't like Castro. They don't like Chavez. They don't like anybody who's questioning the authority.
How about Ahmadinejad?
Ahmadinejad, they don't like Ahmadinejad. He's another one and that kind of thing. And the American system sets itself up as the, it's again back to this question, intellectual. The United States, we have a good system. It's great. I love the country and everything. We have a system, but we have a system that's good for all time. We have a system that is historically legitimate. And you've got people who align with us, and to the degree that they align with, the Marxists would call them running dogs. They want to kiss the hem of the power. They want to get close as like a courtier's war. A role in a feudal system where you have a king that has all the power. You want to be close to him, and courtiers running around getting special interests for themselves.
Did you say that we have a perfect system, or
no? They claim.
They claim.
They would claim. No, they would claim.
Okay, I misunderstood.
No, Ardeshir, they would claim historical legitimacy. Just like for 1,000 years after
Do you think that
Rome.
the United States is trying to create crisis in that part of the world, having its eyes on Central Asia and the Muslims?
Well, we could see things in general in normal geopolitical terms. Sea power, American took over after the Second World War. They got this influence, and they think that they have a pattern that's good for the world in terms of social, political, and economic organization of a society. And anybody should be aligned with us. Anybody who's aligning things differently or seeing things differently than that are terrorists.
I wrote an
And
article.
a lot of them happen to be of the Islamic persuasion at the moment. That's de jure. It used to be the communists. It was the communists that were the bad guys.
And
COINTELPRO and all that. You remember all that? They put this.
Of course.
Yeah, they did it. Now
60s.
it's the Islam. Are the sources of this, and the one that I was most interested in. I think he was setting a pattern that is relevant to what the future requires, and it's becoming clear that the pattern that the United States is going to try and have, the pattern for organizing, In every political entity, the assets are all owned by a tiny plutocratic class. The capital instruments are increasingly responsible for production.
I've observed recently in the last, especially 20 years, that the United States and the big powers use the United Nations as an instrument to pressure or to practically have a military intervention into those countries. With regard to Iraq, you saw it.
Yes.
What is this trend?
Well,
and how credible the United Nations will remain in the next 10 years?
I don't know. It's a real big question, isn't it? I think the United Nations is to be supported, and it was done. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, these kind of things and everything, is to be supported. But the problem is that the larger problem is they don't have a system in place that is dealing in terms of the evolving zeitgeist, the reality, the spirit of the age, that is relevant to what the future requires. Just like the feudal systems, King Louis XIV finally said it's the divine right of kings. We get that. And they thought they were legitimate. And these other peons across the ocean were illegitimate terrorists. King George called George Washington a terrorist. Okay. Same old thing. So they're doing that, and the problem is that is the system here, and it is the whole of organization of everything, is going to have to be anchored to history. That's fair enough, but it can't be run in the same unjust way that history has been run if we're going to find something that avoids nuclear holocaust that can wipe out the species. It's a big issue, and the system under which this system operates, calls itself legitimate, is not adequate to what the future requires.
Allow me to say that the organizations that pretend to be the People's Organization of Libya and the resistant forces, so on and so forth, I would like to outright to say that these are trained by the United States, financed by the United States, and they are the lackeys of the United States. They would like to turn Libya into, again, a semi-colony, back to the arms of the United States. United States, as a matter of fact, in the last 20 years, Gaddafi has opened Libya to the Europeans and also to the Americans, as you well know.
Since about 203, really. That's when he really made a change, around the atomic thing and everything,
And I think the United States is influencing through intelligence services, influencing many countries around, trying to influence many countries in the world.
Well, Ardeshir, they got military forces in about 130 countries everywhere in the world. What the hell are they doing up in Iraq when they put the sanctions, 500,000 people killed by our air sanctions, and what do you call it, the no-fly zone? It was horrible. They're thinking about imposing that now.
A few days ago, we invited Mr. Raymond McGovern.
Yeah, wonderful guy.
The person who worked for the CIA for 27 years, to a meeting in Westchester a couple of days ago. And his brother also was there, who's a businessman or a dentist. And I asked the question from Mr. McGovern, what is the budget of the 16 intelligence services operating in the United States?
Interesting,
The United States has 16 intelligence services operating domestically and internationally. And when I asked that question, what's the budget? The brother of Ray McGovern knew the number. It amazed me. He came up with $80 billion.
$80 billion total for the 16?
That's right.
What was top, do you know? I think the DIA is larger than the CIA.
More or less, I wanted to know how many intelligence, how many individuals are working for the intelligence services. I assume that if the salary and the perks and the cars and the womenizing and the hotels and all the installations and gadgets and the salary of one individual is $265,000,
That would make sense.
and you divide that number, $80 billion, by this, you get 300,000 agents.
That's a back of the envelope figuring
That's
on
correct.
your part. Okay,
That's
yeah,
correct.
right. Okay, right.
300,000.
Yeah.
When you divide that by the number of countries in this world, you get 2,000 agents per country.
That's counting, you know, Guinea and things. Right. Okay, small.
The small countries, of course,
San
may
Remo.
have 200.
Yeah, right.
And the big countries may have 5,000.
Right. So the huge.
This is what the United States talks about democracy, but behind your head, it trains the counter-revolution. It trains the most backward, let me put it this way, the most backward groups and individuals that are looking for their own interests.
Yeah.
Individual interests. They don't care what happens to the country. They train them. And I saw this in a meeting in the Church of the United Nations just a couple of days ago. And I saw so many people that the United States is recruiting. I was amazed.
Recruiting to what? To intelligence services?
To intelligence services. As a matter of fact, the United States has become so open about it that in the English programs that the Iranians read, suddenly a Persian text appears, and I saw this a few days ago, that if you want to work for the intelligence service, and we need translators within the army, outside the army, in the administration, it is so brazen. I have never seen a country.
It's happening domestically now. They just voted down against the unions being able to organize and so forth in one of the states, and it's moving that way and everything. It's just it's like fascism.
The system is decaying.
Well, okay, yes, I think it could.
Morally it's decaying. Politically it's decaying. Is losing the what they say, the world community.
Or any legitimacy is what it's losing. And when you say the system, you're talking about the world system.
That's
you're talking
correct.
and that's led by and large by the intellectual integrity of the United States of America. The problem is here.
Yes.
You feel that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a serious thing, and then they're going to be getting paranoid about maybe sensing that in the zeitgeist, that they don't have an answer. And so that makes it very dangerous because they're the ones who have the weapons that are maybe going to be unleashed in some spasm of irrational hatred that can wipe out the entire species since about 1970.
Yeah.
When the revolution in Libya happened.
Going back to Libya, I think what they have talked about so far is a surgical military strike.
Who's saying that? Who's saying that? Where'd you see it?
In the media.
Oh, in the media.
In the media, that among the possibilities,
arming the rebels
or
in Benghazi,
probabilities, is that establishing a no-fly zone.
No, that's what they did in
Now,
Iraq.
how do you
remember?
do that no-fly zone?
Oh, it's huge. It's a huge
What
thing.
do you have to do in order to, with Iraq, you remember?
Yeah, it was terrible.
2000,
remember Madeleine Albright saying to Chris Stahl, that there's 500,000 children, women have died from the result of the no-fly zone and the sanctions.
Exactly.
Well, that's the price we had to pay. That's a lot of human beings.
What's the mechanism of creating a no-fly zone?
Well, I think they have a military sea power. We have power. We have overwhelming power.
I know.
Yeah.
Can you explain the mechanics of it?
No,
the practical part of it. What you have to do in order to stop that country from flying its planes.
Not only the country flying the plane, allowing them only to fly within certain levels. And remember, in Iraq, they were flying over north and south. They had it hemmed in because they were out to get Saddam Hussein and to invade the country.
The first thing you have to do, you have to knock out the radar system.
Okay.
The radar system, knocking out the radar, you have to bomb the radar system, the entire network of that. And this, what does the international law says about something like this?
Yeah, it's a biggie. You'd have to be in the UN. Yeah, it'd be a big thing to do. There'd be opposition. Already it's being voiced by China, Russia. You know, the opposition to no-fly. And even in European circles. I saw a thing from Castro. He had sent forth that it was going to be. He was very worried about imperialist NATO forces. Now they're talking. They got two destroyers going through the American destroyers going up to the Mediterranean through the Suez Canal, and there's a very real danger of them doing some sort of a no-fly zone or some sort of a military action in order to seize those rich resources.
How many years Libya has been under sanctions?
They were under sanctions for a long time. It was very difficult. We used to go to meetings there. We had to get smuggled in to go to these meetings. It was wonderful. It was like the meeting with Mr. Ahmadinejad when he was in New York.
Yes.
All the good guys were there. You know, they would be smuggled into this. Stokely Carmichael, all the Indian nations, all the people from countries that were doing liberation struggles in a real sense rather than the lackeys that are in some of the countries. They would be meeting there in Libya, and he's got a lot of support among those countries. Now, so then that's all background in a certain sense. Should be understood that that was the case. And so we're coming back to the reality now. They're talking about...
What is the justification for this aggressive acts, aggression of the United States against this smaller countries? We are talking about a country that's only 6.7 million people.
There was no aggression against Egypt. They even backed it. It was interesting to me. They backed Mubarak. He was the one that was holding. The big issue in the Middle East is Israel. That's the biggest issue, it seems to me. Still, it's unresolved. They just vetoed a thing where all 15 members of the, you know, that's the biggest issue still. The Israeli thing, because that's Western influence. And
how's studying the military bases of the United States in Bahrain and also in Saudi Arabia?
Fifth Fleet is in Bahrain.
The Fifth Fleet is in Bahrain. Now, what is the composition of this Fifth Fleet?
I don't know.
It has 60 ships, warships around it. It has tens of jets, airplanes on the board. It has 5,000 people on it, 1,000 servicemen on the ground.
Is this the Fifth Fleet only?
That's right.
Okay.
This is the Fifth Fleet.
That's a major armada.
Oh, it is a gigantic. They have turned that Bahrain, this little thing, they have turned it into
a military outpost.
Stockpile of weapons.
And there was an uprising in Bahrain, and that's in the east. What if this thing were to go to Saudi Arabia? What if the democracy would go to Saudi Arabia? I think
democracy and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
You have to turn the entire thing upside down.
Well, okay.
Saudi Arabia has...
But you got that Shia-Sunni thing in Bahrain, and there was a real serious thing going on in Bahrain at the Pearl and everything.
I understand, but Shia-Sunni is a construct of the United States foreign policy.
Well,
that you guys are against each other, so I can...
It's not true?
It is not.
Seems to be.
In Iran. Iran is a Muslim country.
Yes, of course.
Okay, we have at least 10% Sunni in there, and 90% or 80%, 85% are Shia, and the rest of it are different.
What makes the difference? Why say 80%, 90% Shia in Iran rather than Shia in, you know, what makes the... Does it make a difference?
Historically, Iran and Iraq was the center of Shia when at the beginning of Islam, the families got divided. But who should rule?
We understand that, but is it meaningful? Is it a meaningful thing? Seems to be. What were they fighting about? Was it oil or what in when the awful war in the 80s between Iran and Iraq?
Okay, I'm not going to talk about Iran and Iraq war, but Shia and Sunni is fanned. The differences are fanned by two sources. One, Israel, and two, the United States.
Really? That's very interesting.
Okay. In Iran, when I was in college in Iran, next to me was a Jewish student sitting, and on this side was another Muslim or an Arab was sitting, and the next was, we had no differences. We never asked We didn't know. I didn't know the differences. I was helping the person who was next to me, right?
Yeah.
He needed help with his engineering drawing. I was helping him. Later on, I learned that he is Jewish. We didn't have these differences. Armenian on the street that I lived, an Armenian was living on the corner. My mother made bread, took it to the Armenian.
I know you told me it was really good bread.
You took it to the Arab, and we had no problem.
You told me that bread was really good.
That's right. Oh, I loved it. I was as she was.
And what you're saying is true. There's true. There was camaraderie.
Today in Isfahan, the Jewish population has its own community of 25,000 people in Isfahan and other religions. We have these problems are really fanned and exacerbated the differences by those who want to take advantage of the difference between groupings and nationalities.
Well,
I understand in Iraq the Shiites were under more oppression than the Sunnis, and the Sunnis were part of the party of Saddam Hussein. But today, I was in a mosque last week in Queens, and to my amazement, the man who was talking about Islam and how good it is, he was emphasizing that in Islam, unity, brotherhood, working together with not only Muslims, with all other religions and nationalities. He spent 2 hours talking about how we are all children of God and we have to work together. But when it comes to the Zionists, you listen to a Zionist kid on a CNN, suddenly he says, oh yeah, he's from another, he's a Shia, that's a Sunni, they have differences, they kill each other, all this. Why? Because Israel wants to occupy the Palestinian land so that there are the differences.
And they want to be hegemonic. They would like to be hegemonic if they could in that region.
That's right.
And there are maps that go all the way to Ur.
And the United States loves to see chaos. Chaos.
Okay.
Because by creating chaos and failed states, they can exploit it. When there is no government to defend.
Well, they will claim that that's also a good breeding ground for people who are terrorists, like Al-Qaeda and so forth.
But
then
who
when there's
supports
chaos,
Al-Qaeda?
Yeah, okay,
But who supports Al-Qaeda?
Who
supported in 1979 and 1980 beginning, supported the
Osama bin Laden.
Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden,
Have you seen
the United States. So the United States is a terrorist-sponsored state, in fact, while it charges other countries with this
Well, they
sin.
supported the Osama bin Laden when they were against Russia because Russia was seen as our enemy.
But
and what's that movie about the war?
But you can't have the apple and eat it too.
Well, they would
if
like to.
If you use someone, that man or that person or that state may turn around and cut your own throat.
Well, we're doing that up in Afghanistan now, and then we got that. So anyway, the point it gets down to is that the system in place is not adequate to what the future requires. Where is it? I mean, it's coming out. We do have to anchor it all. When you get weapons, just a large issue that has to be on everybody's mind, even subconsciously, is that that's really something after 200,000 years of our sojourn on this earth as a species, we now have weapons, Ardeshir, that are species lethal. That means that if they're unleashed, it's not like even as recent as the Second World War. If they're unleashed, it would mean the end of our entire species. That seems to be from the modeling the case. You can't test it.
A fraction can remain probably for sickly on Earth.
No, not even that, Ardeshir. Not even that. There would be no single human being. There would be a lot more of the whole of life wiped out. In the if the weapons that exist in reality, not inflection points of theories of relativity, but so that's a new existential reality in universe.
Yes.
Now, on the other side at the
why
level...
the United States and the nuclear states who signed NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, what year was it that was officiated and was signed by the big powers?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
I know Israel didn't sign.
It was about 50 years ago.
Was it really? Okay,
That's right.
yeah, okay.
50 years ago,
okay.
1957, 60, 63. Now, why this, the originators, the authors of this document that gave it to other countries to sign did not follow what they really themselves wrote on this paper, and that was elimination of the nuclear
Well, they
weapons.
have built them down, but they're even worse. Binary bacteriological weapons, the black ops operations of research, it's always been the intellectuals are used by the political leaders to build new machines to give them a weapons advantage to try to conquer other people. That's realpolitik. That's something that we live with or we have. But on the other side of that equation of the destructiveness, thinking intellectually, their modeling that shows that collectively, in terms of our technology and so on, we have transcended material scarcity from about the same year, about 1970, that the weapon systems became species lethal. So that the material, that the world is qualitatively changed in a way, and we don't have systems that are able to relate to a system in which all of our institutions were historically built, reifying ideas of human nature, reifying everything. We're going through a qualitative transformation at a cosmic level, and we don't have any intellectual leadership that can deal with things in a systems way. And if somebody comes up with something like Gaddafi may have, one thing, no matter what goes on in Gaddafi's Libya, whether there's whatever goes on, the ideas that he proposed are progressive. They should not be thrown out, the ideas. And the people of Libya agree with the ideas. But that would call into question, if you think about it, that would call into question the ideas that operate and the institutional assumptions that operate under the supposed legitimate system represented by the United States of America, because they have an interest and institutional structures and so forth related to a system that's been outdated, much like feudal lords had an interest in institutions that were outdated by a United States example. I think that's probably...
You put it very nicely.
Well, I think that may be understood...
I'm more down to earth.
Well, anyway...
I have a study.
No, he has a system that is what the future requires in a systems way, and our intellectuals, or the world intellectuals, and particularly the United States, are reifying outdated institutions, and it's very, for that reason, very dangerous, and that's one reason why we should keep an eye on it, in my humble opinion. One problem, like always, Ardeshir, my dear friend,
yes, dear.
We've run out of time.
I know.
I know,
That's
and I've wrapped down too long. But thank you for those statistics and everything, and keep the faith, solidarity, and so forth. And thank you, Ardeshir, for coming in.
Sir, for
all the best. And I'm sorry we've run out of time. We go on everything, but I think it's worth paying attention to. And because I don't think this revolution and things that are going on is going to stop. It's going to go on. It's finally going to get back to the United States of America, I think, this longing for a real, honest-to-God, liberating democracy.
About this governors wants to destroy the labor unions?
There it goes. It's coming back to here. But it'll come here, too, as well. But it's a very challenging thing. We got to keep an eye on it and keep our minds open. And thanks a lot, Ardeshir. All the best, to Eleanor, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for viewing. That's it for now. And so thank you for tuning in. Okay.